Everybody, welcome back to Readers That Write. Today we're going to talk about a book that has me, for lack of a better word, confused. And that is Vulkan Lives. This is probably one of the most controversial books in the Horus Heresy. I actually just finished it about a week ago. And frankly, I didn't want to wait to talk about it. I know this is the second Horus Heresy book I've done out of order, but that's okay because this book deserves a lot of talking about. It is potentially one of the largest plot points at this point in the Horus Heresy, about that halfway point. But there's a lot in it that has a lot of controversy and a lot that didn't sit well with fans. So we're going to dive into it, and towards the end, I'll get to my feelings and what I did and didn't like about it. So the one warning I will give right now is this will have spoilers for the Horus Heresy. We are at book 26 at this point. It will spoil a lot. That is okay. If you have not read up to this point, stop here if you don't want spoilers. To be fair, most of these books up to this point came out, I think, in the latest 2016, 2017. So you've had plenty of time to get caught up on them. But if you're coming to the Horus Heresy late like I am, I get it. You don't have to if you don't want to be spoiled. I already was at this point, so I knew the general plot points of this book going into it. But I won't be offended if you have to pause it and come back when you get here. So, with that warning, let's dive into it. Vulkan Lives starts immediately after the Istvaan V massacre, the drop site massacre, where the Salamanders, the Raven Guard, and the Iron Hands are ambushed by the people they thought were friends while trying to attack Horus's rebellion. There are several flashbacks into that actual fight, which are really good, and fill in a lot of the plot holes that you've had up to this point. So far, the only actual view of the Istvaan V massacre is from Korax's point of view, and Korax, being the sneaky assaults from the edges type fighter, doesn't take a lot of direct action in this fight like Vulkan and Ferrus Manus do. He's still heavily involved. He does go toe-to-toe with one of his brothers and nearly kills Lorgar in the fight, but he's not as deeply entrenched as Ferrus Manus and Vulkan are, because they're leading the charge through the center, including the Salamanders coming up directly with the World Eaters and the Death Guard, and seeing what they've become up to this point after they had committed to rebellion again, after the World Eaters and Death Guard had committed to their heresy. As this opens, Vulkan was killed. If you're not aware of this yet, he is perpetual, which means he can die and he can get revived. Well, and he automatically revives. Think of it like an infinite respawn on a video game. Doesn't matter how many times he gets killed, as long as an atom of him still exists, barring warp shenanigans, he does come back immediately. Well, he does come back. The amount of time it takes to come back depends on sometimes the injury and his desire to come back. There are times when he can come back in seconds. There are other times it can take a lot longer. So this plays a key role. After being killed once and reviving, Conrad Kurz takes him prisoner and begins to do unspeakable things to him. Conrad Kurz is infamous for his terror tactics, his desire to kill and maim and torture, all very terrible things, but that is what the Night Haunter does. And he finds what at first he thinks is a really cool thing in Vulkan. He is able to try different things to see what will kill a Primarch and what won't, where their lines are, and he's trying to get Vulkan to break away from his ideals. Because Vulkan is one of the Primarchs that is very famous for his ideals and standards, like Sanguinius and the Lion in a lot of cases, and Rubute Gilliman and Rogel Dorn are all very famous for having those very hard lines that they will never cross. And Konrad Kurz' entire point is to try and get Vulkan to cross it. He tries to break him by every means necessary. Now, while all of this torture and Konrad Kurz coming up with some of the most evil ways to try and break Vulkan is happening, there's a second story that takes place. The second story is primarily with Artelis Numion, one of the Pyre Guard and senior captains of the Salamanders, who is attempting to thwart a bunch of word bearers from doing or committing a ritual. This story is very, very cool. One of my favorite parts of this part of the Horus Heresy are the Black Shields. I love to see the Space Marines having to think for themselves for the first time and try and figure out how to proceed. You've got the Iron Hands who are struggling with the loss of their Primarch. You have Raven Guard who don't know what's going on with their Primarch because they were separated or they were detached to one of the other forces and managed to escape while the bulk of their forces had to flee into the mountains. And they haven't been able to link up with them or communicate with them. You have the same situation with the Salamanders. The Salamanders did try and retreat. A lot of them managed to get away to various ships and escape the system, but they lost their cohesion and leadership. So Captain Numion is attempting to pull this together. He's got several of his comrades with him, Salamanders, but he's also got Raven Guard. He's also got some Iron Hands as well, and they're doing everything they can to thwart the word bearers from their dark rituals. On top of that, one of the characters that no one really knows if they love or hate is on this world with his own mission from the Cabal. And that is John Grammaticus. He's been a major player so far, well, a major minor player in the Heresy, where he is sent on various missions to try and accomplish different things. And he's forced to try and choose between his Cabal master, the will of his Cabal masters, and humanity. He's trying to decide whether he's going to side with his people or side with the organization that has given or turned him into a perpetual and given him a long life. It's the first steps of this take place in this book, where John is put in a position where he really does have to choose. He has to choose whether he's going to follow through with the plan that the Cabal has set, and he has to find ways to work with people that really don't trust him, mostly because he is a perpetual and a psyker. And this dichotomy between John and Numion is one of the key focal points of the story. And it's a really, really fun give and take, seeing the Space Marines having to figure out how to work with someone that shouldn't be their equal, and in a lot of cases isn't, but because he's a perpetual and he has information that's critical to them, they're forced to treat him more like an equal than they normally would. The Salamanders are famous for being very personable and helpful, but the Pyre Guard, that's not their job. The Pyre Guard are the very headstrong, driven warriors of the Salamanders who focus on the flames in the fight. They are the most dangerous Salamanders that exist, that are thrown into the fight next to their Primarch because they're the only ones who can really hang with him. And even that doesn't always work. So when John Grammaticus runs into these salamanders, along with some Raven Guard and some Iron Hands, none of them trust him, mostly because he's also on a world that's being overcome by Chaos Cultists, but also because he doesn't make sense to them. And the only person who really actually tries to go out of his way to help John is Captain Numion, because John Grammaticus reveals to him that Vulkan still lives. At this point, none of these Space Marines know if any of their Primarchs are alive. The Raven Guard suspects that Corax is alive, but they don't know. Everybody knows that Ferrus Manus is dead. His death was very visible in the middle of the battlefield, so there's no question he's dead. And some of the Salamanders think Vulkan's dead, some think he's not, and no one's really sure what his status is. So, this book has a lot of really cool themes to it, too. It focuses on what we would do for faith and personal convictions, and how far we can hold and enduring to the bitter end for our beliefs and our moral creeds, despite everything that is thrown at us. And these themes are fantastic, and they're well explained. They're some of the best themes in a story, or in a 40 or 30K story that I've seen in quite a while. And it's one of the things that made me really like this book. But here's the big but. This book has one massive problem that makes it as controversial as it is. It has the potential to be stellar. This book easily could have been in the top 4 Horus Heresy novels across the board. There are some of the best conversations and interactions between Primarchs that exist in the stories. The only ones that come close are the ones between Sanguinius and Horus, and Rogaldorn and Horus in the early books. You also get some later on in Age of Exterminatus between Fulgrim, who's gone crazy, and Perturabo, who's trying to figure out what's going on. You also get some in the book that comes after this, between the Lion and Rabuta Gilliman, that are really good too. But the level of connection between the Night Haunter and Vulkan is so good. But the writing style has a major flaw. It not only flips between tenses, so past and present, it also flips between POVs. Vulkan stories are told in first person, mostly first person limited, but sometimes it goes into what's called a detached first person, where you're seeing it through one person's point of view without being in that person's head. And it's really confusing. But then anything with Captain Numion is in third person. And anything with John Grammaticus is in third person. And sometimes there's a couple points in the story where it actually changes mid-chapter, and it is abrupt and it is jarring. And this threw me out of the book every single time it happened. I did most of this on audiobook because my life is crazy right now. And I honestly think that would have made it even worse. Because when you're listening on audiobook, things flow nice and smooth through one of the types of stories, whether it was first person present or first person past, first person past in the flashbacks, or third person past for everything else. But then not only does the entire flow of the story change, the pacing and the cadence changes too, because it's changing character perspective. And if one of those two things changed, it wouldn't be too bad. Switching between third and first person is probably the greatest sin of them. And this really goes to destroy what was... It had the potential to be one of the best Horus Heresy books, bar none. But this killed it. It's so hard to push through and get through. And sometimes if you end it a chapter and then go to pick it up later, it's super jarring because the last thing you remember is Captain Numion doing something in third person, and the very first sentence starts with, I did this, or I did X, or I awoke to. And you have to go, wait, who's talking? What's going on? Especially in the beginning. By the end, you understand that first person is Vulkan. It still takes a minute to register. And I had to jump back 30 seconds almost any time that changed, just so I could have enough time to grasp who was talking. Initially, it was really, really annoying. And I don't know if that was a call by the author. I know working in IPs can be a little frustrating because someone will ask for something specific. So I don't know if he was asked by Games Workshop or by an editor to make sure Vulkan's part was very clear in first person. But if it weren't for that, this would probably be one of my favorite stories across the board. It does have some great moments. The final fight between Captain Numion and the Dark Apostle is fantastic. It is super cool. And the ending that I'm not going to spoil because it is really good of that fight is fantastic. Once again, like I said, every other part of this book is really good. And if it didn't have those changes that would just rip me out of the story, it would have been top of my list. But because of it, it has to fall way down. This is a big ding for me. But in just some final thoughts, this is a very key book at book 26. It reveals a lot of the world building and really moves the heresy forward a step to Imperium Secundus. That from the books before this, it was kind of floundering. The entire series had kind of reached a doldrum where we were talking about a bunch of different tangential stories that all happened at roughly the same time. And it was really confusing to tell who was doing what, when, and where, and how much they overlapped. And sometimes there were some plot holes and crosses. And Vulkan Lives is the definitive line that steps forward and says, okay, we're moving forward. Enough of these side stories and side quests. We're moving forward. And that is one thing I do really like about it. It does bring a lot of potential. So, if you guys have any thoughts about Vulkan Lives and you've read it, please let me know in the comments below. I'm looking forward to see what you guys think about it. Like I said, online, it is a very controversial story. Some people love it. Some people hate it. A lot of people feel kind of like I do, where it was this close. It was this close from being good, but the one thing that made it bad made it really bad. And don't forget to like and subscribe and ring that little bell so you get notification anytime we have any new videos. I've got some more cool stuff coming that I hope you guys will like. And we'll see you guys next time.